What is going on, everyone? It's quiet. It's too quiet. That's better. All right. So, surprise stream. I know that I had said on the last episode of the first 15, actually, this past Thursday, that I may be doing a stream this evening. And I was planning on playing a game. Honestly, I was very tired today, just exhausted in general. But I got some surprise fun news yesterday. And that was the fact that Project Black Flag put out their second playtest packet. So if you don't know, after the whole OGL debacle, which, you know, we won. There we go. Not my finger phasing into nothingness. We won. Kobold Press, who has been a prolific publisher over the years for 5th edition content, they basically came out and said, hey, we're going to come up with our own system. It's going to be its own thing, and it'll work with some things, it won't work with others. And we've been seeing what this is. So, and that's where we are slowly rolling towards. That's what this is. So, like it says on here, playtest packet number 2. This document contains the character class rules for the second core fantasy role-playing playtest packet, and then it gives a link to provide feedback, which you can see on the right over here. So if you are interested in checking this out, I'm going to put the link here in chat. That way you can access this PDF and then also provide your feedback should you feel inclined to. Now, I did a stream where I talked about playtest packet 1 and, you know, the different things about that, how it was different from 5e, but it's basically just 5e. You know, they were calling races lineages, sub-races were heritages, attacks were known as strikes, and then they gave like some different races and backgrounds and talents, which are just overpowered feats. But one of the things that we didn't get with that was any class stuff. So you really couldn't, like, you could use the material that was there to like make a 5e character with the races for like the Fireforged dwarf or the Glade or Grove elf. But you couldn't use a class, and this gives us that first look. So we're going to jump over to the second playtest, and we are going to start checking this out. Now, the first thing that they have in here is their new luck system. Now, when I first heard about luck, it was in the first packet, and it was right here in the final checklist. Your luck points are set to 0. So when you started, whatever your luck points were, they were set to 0. Nobody knew what that meant. Now we do. So the way luck works is essentially a system that I used in my own private home games, but more limited and better. So the way that it works is you get 5 luck points at maximum, and as you play, you will earn luck points from various means, and the way that you use them is when you roll, or whenever you make any kind of, like, you know, D20 test, you can spend them on a 1-to-1 basis to apply a bonus to your roll. And like it says here, for example, if you have 4 luck points and roll a 13, you can spend 2 to turn it into a 15. You choose to spend these points after you make the roll, but before the GM declares whether or not... The music is nearly drowning me out. Then I would turn the music down. So you have to declare that you're using these points before the DM says whether or not you succeed or fail. Now, the thing is that this mirrors a system that I was using for a while in my home games, where the players would be given an amount of inspiration points, IP, and you could just spend those to increase your dice rolls. Now, the difference was that they were only handed out just by me handing them out, which I think that's a failure on me, because I very rarely ever handed them out. But I also just let them have as many as they wanted. This limits it. So you can only ever have a maximum of 5 luck points. Oh yeah, sorry. Alternatively, when you make an attack roll ability check or save, you can spend 3 to re-roll it. I did forget to put that in my at a glance. Let me just add that real quick. Can spend 3 to re-roll a d20. There we go. Yeah, and that's it. You know, Stacy played in my game, so she knows how that worked. And I thought it was a fun system. It kind of let you build them up and use them as you needed. What ended up happening, though, was that players just let them sit, and they accrued, and they were never really spent that often until it was those moments where, like, they just couldn't fail. And one of the problems that I actually had with that was that it meant that you couldn't really have those, like, nail-biting moments where a failure was so powerful, because you could just add enough to it to bypass it. So the way that Kobold, the way that Project Black Flag works is when you fail an attack or save, you gain a point. When the DM thinks that you did good, you gain a point. But if you have 5 and you fail an attack roll or save, or the GM gives you a point, you must immediately roll a d4 and reset your luck points to whatever that is. And like it says, the cap on luck points is meant to encourage players to regularly use their luck instead of hoarding it. Make sure to use it as often as possible so you don't risk losing it. I love this. This is the exact thing that my system failed with. Put a cap on it that's low. Make it worthwhile to use it. That 1-to-1 increase allows them to take those little moments where, oh, I just needed 1 more. Oh, I just needed 2. And yeah, you have to declare what it is, whether or not you think it's going to pass or fail. So there is still that meta knowledge of, like, well, you might not know the AC, but you know that so-and-so rolled a 15 and you rolled a 13, so you might as well add it. But being able to spend 3 points to re-roll is good, and you can only do that once because you could never have 6 points. I like this. I really like how this is set up. And if it wasn't for the fact that I have switched over to using other initiative systems, I would be very for switching to this. It would actually be very easy to apply this to D&D Beyond using essentially the same system that I did before, where you just give an item that's called inspiration points. So I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be pushing this onto any one of my parties, but you know, I might, when, you know, as time moves forward, if I feel, you know, it's that we could use for a change, I might. I'm not standing by any point right now of doing it or not, but I might. All right, so that right there, that's actually kind of like the first major point about Playtest 2 is the luck points. So, you know, again, it's just replacing the inspiration system, because like it says down here, it's intended to completely replace the inspiration mechanic. So you don't get that, you know, one, you know, like advantage roll, you just get the luck points. All right, so moving on to the classes. So that's what this whole playtest is really about, is kind of getting into some of the classes, and by some I just mean two. And what we got is the fighter and the wizard. Now, one of the things that you might notice right here, the class options at a glance, is that the fighter is actually key based in strength or dex. Now, in the past, fighters have often been strength based. So as we go into here, we can even see that their saving throw is strength, and that you need to have either, sorry, one second, my dogs are screaming. Sorry about that. So to be able to multi-class, you could have strength or dex, but you're only getting that strength saving throw. Now, this can actually be strength or dex. And the reason for this is because there's a lot of really good options for dex-based fighters. Whether you're two-hand wielding, whether you're, two-weapon wielding, whether you're playing an archer or a ranger, being able to make the key ability dexterity really helps with that, and it also gives you that dexterity saving throw, which is super important. Dex saves are crazy powerful. As for the starting equipment, as for the starting hit points, the proficiencies, and the starting equipment, this is basically just copy and paste from 5e. I mean, you can see right here, it's a D10, it's plus your con. It's the same thing over here. You're getting all the basic armors and shields. You're also getting all the weapons, no tool proficiencies. And then this is where that one difference is, con in your choice of strength and dex. And then acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, perception, and survival. It's a carbon copy of 5e, so we know what we're getting into. Also, the equipment is exactly the same. You know, it's, and I joked about this in my post over on my Discord, where I said about, you know, let's analyze how well Kobold Press can, you know, copy and paste. I will give them this. I will give them the credit that some of the stuff that they are doing with this is really interesting. But boy, oh boy, did their copy paste buttons must have run out, because there are points where it is just verbatim. And you know what? I'm okay with that to a degree. I don't mind it because I know 5e. It's the system that I have spent the most time in, and it's the one I'm most comfortable with. But on top of that, it's also the most known system across the board, and it is still here, and this can just be worked in with conjunction to it. So I like that there are these differences. You know, you could have a 5e fighter and a Black Flag fighter. I don't think they were aiming at an out. No, and that's true. I know that, you know, like MCDM is actually out there trying to make like whole new things. But now that everything is, you know, now that the OGL is out in Creative Commons, you can just take this stuff and just copy and paste it, and it is what it is. So I'm okay with this. All right, so starting to look into the abilities, though, this is where we are going to see some differences. So first things first, the fighters get the ability of Last Stand. When you take damage that would reduce your hit points to an amount less than half of your hit point maximum, you can use your reaction to expend one or more of your hit die up to a number equal to your proficiency bonus. Immediately roll these and regain that hit points plus your con modifier, and this can be done once per long rest. I think it's pretty clear to see this is essentially just an alternate version of Second Wind. They work very similarly. So whereas Second Wind is, you know, it's once per short or long rest, you can use a bonus action to recover 1d10 plus your level. Now, granted, Last Stand is more because you get to, you know, let's say your proficiency bonus, let's say you have a +3, you could recover 3d10 plus your constitution modifier. And if your constitution modifier was, say, a +4, maybe you're a constituted fighter, you know, that is on average going to be about 23 points that you are able, or 22 points that you're able to recover on average. That's pretty decent. Whereas Second Wind is once per short or long rest, you get back 1d10 plus your level. So if you're playing, you know, level 5 character, that's going to be on average about 11 points that you're recovering. But Second Wind does have the advantage of being on a short rest. So if you are in a group and with a party that takes regular short rests, maybe you have a wizard that wants to get back some spell slots, or maybe you have a warlock that wants to get all their spell slots. If you are short resting, the fighter is more capable and Second Wind really comes into play more often. But Last Stand is that really good option of, like, you just took a massive amount of damage and you can bolster yourself, dig your feet in, and kind of recover a little bit of that from that hit. So I like how Last Stand is. It's a little bit more powerful, but it's used less often. So there is a balance there. All right, so on to the next thing that I really like about how they're doing the new fighter, or how they're doing their fighter, is these martial actions. Now, these aren't really seen in 5e. They're almost kind of like the fighting styles, but they're really not. So the way that they work is when you reach, like when you get to first level, you choose one of them, and then you have that bonus action just as a thing you can do. So your options are aim, which gives you to double your proficiency bonus for your first attack roll with a ranged weapon. And wind up is actually the same thing, but with melee. So double your proficiency bonus. Let's say you're level 3, you got a +2 to your proficiency bonus. Now you're hitting with a +4. You get that extra +2 bonus to there. It's a decent bump, and that's kind of the same thing that we have with archery, where you get a +2 bonus to attack rolls made with ranged, but this is something that you actively have to use. It's not just a overall fighting style that just gives you a permanent bonus. This is something that you actively have to use. And there's a part of me that likes this because it actually makes players think about the stuff that they have to do while they are in combat to be more tactical. The next one actually very much reminds me of something that I recently learned about. So the next one is guard. It requires you to be wearing a shield, and as a bonus action you raise your shield to intercept incoming attacks. So you select a creature within 5 feet. They now have disadvantage on the first attack they make against you. Now, this made me think about Pathfinder when I was starting to really dig into Pathfinder and learning about it, because Pathfinder has an action called Raise a Shield, which is that you gain a circumstance bonus to your AC while your shield remains up. So while it's not as powerful as raise a shield, this does give you that option of a more tactical ability in combat for that bonus action of, okay, I attacked with my sword and now I'm gonna put up my shield. You know, I'm still gonna get that +2 AC, because that's where D&D differs. You know, in D&D, your shield has a flat bonus, so you're still getting that +2 to your AC, and I imagine Black Flag is still following that standard, you know, +2 bonus. So whereas Pathfinder requires you to put it up just to get that circumstance bonus, Kobold Press's Black Flag is say, okay, you have a +2 to your AC, but you can also use your bonus action now to get disadvantage on that first attack against you. And this kind of also goes in line with something like the dodge action, you know, which would be a full action that gives disadvantage on all attacks. So something like this gives the fighter that ability to like brace themselves and put themselves on guard to prepare for the next attack. And then this one really caught me off guard. And I'll have to pull up, I forgot to pull it up in here. 2-weapon fighting. Here we go. I want the action. So the way, so in 5e, the way that 2-weapon fighting is when you attack with a light melee weapon that you're holding in one hand, you can use a bonus action to attack with a different light melee weapon that you're holding in the other hand. You don't add your ability modifier to the offhand unless it's negative. So, okay. Black Flag is that as a bonus action, you can make an attack with a light melee weapon that you're holding. You add your ability modifier to the damage as you would normally, and if it is light, it is thrown. So, why is this good? Now, it does not require you to be holding 2 light melee weapons. You could be holding a long sword in one hand and a short sword in the other. You could have that, you know, more riposte style fighter. You could also be fighting with, say, a javelin, or with, you know, just really anything other than those light melee weapons. We'll pull this up here. Oh wait, do we want the table? That's what. So before, the only weapons that you would be able to do this with are the ones that have the light property. So this now means that as long as it doesn't have two-handed, you could use it and have another weapon in your other hand. Like I said, you could have a javelin, you could have a mace, a quarterstaff, you could have a spear, I mean, battle axe, a flail. You can't have any of the heavy ones. You could have a lance, technically. Again, the longsword, like we said. Rapier. It was not light, so now you could dual wield that, you know. Again, I love that this is what they're doing, because like it says on here, in 5e, a 2-weapon fighter is required to use their attack action. Oh, that's right. No, this is also something different. I was going to get to this. So the way that 2-weapon fighting is that when you take the attack action, you then use your bonus action. This is simply just as a bonus action, you can make a weapon attack with a light melee weapon in your hand. It is no longer a requirement that you attack with your first hand. So what this actually means is that if you wanted to, say, take the hide action, or, you know, like go in, get a quick strike, and then use the hide action, you could do that, because you could use your bonus action to attack with a dagger or a short sword, or, you know, something that is a light melee weapon, and then use your action to hide, or use your action to disengage, or to cast a spell even. The quick strike is kind of like 2-weapon fighting, but having it be a more tactical option. So that is actually what I really like about these martial actions. They take something that already kind of existed and give it a more tactical, you know, actionable use. It is something that the player has to be actively, you know, looking to engage with in order for it to work. And I love that. I love that they are, you know, it's kind of putting the onus more on the player to say, hey, you know, instead of just having all these passive abilities which just give you this thing and this thing, like you actively have to do this thing if you want to get this bonus. So I like that. Moving on to our next ability, Action Surge. So Action Surge is basically the exact same thing. Once per long or short rest, you get to take another action. Pretty much the exact same thing, so nothing too crazy there. Discipline, this is actually just the name of their subclasses, so this is your fighter discipline, and you know, we'll get into that here in a bit. And then improvement, this is the exact same thing as an ability score improvement. Now, something that I do want to point out that is different about Kobold Press and Project Black Flag, the way that they are doing their ASIs now is that it's just called an improvement, and in an improvement, you get to increase an ability score by 1 and take a talent. Now, this made me look at the talents a lot closer, especially the ones that were listed in the previous pack. So one thing that I noticed afterwards, like once I read that, all of the talents from the previous book, none of them give you a bonus to your, you know, to an ability score. Come on. Get rid of that. There we go. None of them give you a bonus to your ability score. And while I kind of, you know, looked back and forth between the talents, you know, for example, Polyglot was the equivalent to Linguist. So Linguist in 5e, you get a +1 to your intelligence, you learn 3 languages, and you're able to create written ciphers, whereas Polyglot is 3 languages of your choice, advantage on charisma to interact with creatures that have you know, one of your 3 languages, and you get to add a proficiency bonus to understand verbal and written languages. And I kind of was like, okay, well, that's good. Like, that +1 to intelligence was nice. Now I realize how they're doing this, and it's that you get to increase a score by 1 and take a talent, which makes my point that I made in the last playtest where I said talents are just feats but overpowered. This is so much more true now. So I really like that this is the way that they're going, because I think it makes a lot more sense. It seems like OpenD&D is doing that also. So the thing about OpenD&D and what they're doing is that at 4th, you know, at the levels that you would get an ability score improvement, you get a feat, and it's just a feat. And one of the feats just so happens to be that you get to increase one ability score by 1, or increase 1 by 2 or 2 by 1, or you can take a feat. Now, the thing is that most feats in OpenD&D are now giving you that +1 to an ability score. So it is kind of working in the same way, whereas Kobold Press is basically saying, hey, you get to increase an ability score by 1 and take a talent. OpenD&D is saying, okay, you get to pick a feat, and one of the feats lets you increase your ability scores, but everything's kind of giving you a plus to something. Now, this does give you a little bit of extra freedom, though, because let's say, for example, I wanted to take Crossbow Expert. Okay, I'm now increasing my dexterity, but what if I didn't want to increase my dexterity? What if my dexterity was already 20 and I wanted to instead increase my constitution, which was maybe at a 17, and it would give me the new modifier? Black Flag giving you the ability to choose what that ability score is, I like that a lot more. You know, having that freedom to just say, you know, okay, here's your talent, and increase one of your ability scores. I like how that works. Now, I also like how 1D&D is, but looking at this, you know, looking at Black Flag, I like that a little bit more. All right. So, 5th level ability, extra attack, multi-attack. It's the same thing. Once on your turn, you can make 2 attacks when you take the attack action. So it's the exact same thing. You attack twice instead of once when you take the attack action. So nothing to really discuss there. Gotta bring up my notes. All right, so those are the basic abilities for the fighter with Kobold or with Project Black Flag, because they're only giving us from levels 1 to 8, which I actually kind of like that they gave us that far, because you could actually run a decent sized campaign with these characters as is so far. You could have a Fireforge fighter and a Fireforge dwarf fighter and a Cloud Elf wizard in your party now, starting at 1st level and going all the way up to 8, which, depending on how a DM runs and how a party works, it is very likely that that could last you a year or two, maybe a year, I would say, probably, to get to level 8. Depending on how the party works, but even if it's a couple weeks or months, it's a good chunk of character development. But now we're going to move on to the fighter subclasses, also known as disciplines. So the first one that we're looking at is the Spellblade. Now, the Spellblade is basically just the Eldritch Knight. So if we switch over to the Eldritch Knight abilities, you can see here, I picked Echo Knight. We want Eldritch Knight. There we are. So you learn 2 cantrips. So there we go, 2 cantrips. You learn a number of spells that are available on this list, which will scroll up. There we go. So 3rd level, look at that. Cantrips known 2, 3 and 2, 4 and 3. Oh my god, it's copy and paste. I'm not gonna like hold that against them. It's convenient knowing that it is the same, but it's basically the same thing. The first ability of arcane spellcasting is the exact same thing as the spellcasting on here. But what changes is enchant weapon. So previously in 5e we had weapon bond. So you perform a 1-hour ritual, which can be done during a short rest, and when you finish this, you enchant, you bond yourself to a weapon, and it can never be disarmed from you. And as long as you are on the same plane of existence, you can summon it to your hand as a bonus action. It just magically appears to you. That's fine and all. That's great to always have a weapon at hand. I like what Black Flag is doing, because enchant weapon gives you a personal +1 weapon. As a 1-hour ritual, which can be done on a short rest, you enchant a weapon that when it is in your hands, only your hands, it gets a +1 to attack rolls and damage. I love this. This is so cool. And it even says that it ceases to be magical when it isn't on your person. I love this. How cool is it to have a character walking around with this sword that is personally enchanted, and if shit goes wrong and you lose that sword, you don't just have another schmo running around with a +1 weapon. It's now just a mundane weapon. The other reason I like this ability puts into place the rule that there could be fighters out there that have +2 and +3 weapons that only work in their hands. And granted, this is just a +1 ability. I don't know if it ever increases to like give you a higher bonus, but to argue now the fact that like, oh, this is personally their magic weapon, and when it's in your hands it's just a standard crossbow, but in their hands it's a +3 poison crossbow. I love this, and this is something that Wizards of the Coast kind of recently did with their D&D movie NPCs that they made for the characters, where they have like damage bonuses that are exclusive to them, where Forge Fitzwilliam gets a bonus to poison damage on all of his attacks because he's just a poisonous person. Something like this could be put into a game from a DM's perspective on enemies, where it's like, this is their weapon. In your hands it's just a longsword, but in their hand it was a +1 flaming longsword, but you're not them, and now it's just a mundane sword. And while that can be a little biting to a player, it also allows a DM to arm their enemies with weapons that are far more powerful than they could have without the risk of just handing those over to the players. So I like something like this. Not only is this a cool ability, and in my personal opinion, better than Weapon Bond, I think it opens the door to a lot of good options for the future, especially for DMs. Okay, so, sorry, my back is itchy as can be. I kind of wish our individual weapons in P5 are that way. I will say I thought DMs used those loot weapons as a way to gift, well, different strokes for different folks. There are DMs out there that if they have their players fighting an enemy, that they'll give them a weapon that their intention is that, hey, this is being handed over to your players. There are some DMs out there like myself that kind of hesitate on putting a really strong weapon into an enemy's hand because you know that it can just end up in your player's hands. This is actually why I use something, this is why I use the, something from the creature loot table that I use with Aaron, where stuff can be tattered, where it doesn't work properly and it needs to be repaired by fixing it and taking it somewhere. So when you have a tattered weapon, it doesn't work, and you need to go and get it fixed before you can use it. So something like that is a system that can be put in place to make sure that you're not just outfitting your players with crazy amounts of magic items and whatnot. But again, something like this is the way that, I think it is a really good way that it works. So, like I said, I like Enchant Weapon a lot better than Weapon Bond. Weapon Bond is cool to be able to just summon your weapon, but to get that bonus to a +1, or to get that bonus to attack and damage, so nice. All right, so additionally at 3rd level with the Spell Blade, you get to have your access, whenever you take a talent, of martial or magic. So this is showing that we are going to have multiple different talent lists, which we will see in a little bit. But it also means that there are restrictions on that stuff. So Spellblades will get access to martial and magic. And then we get to 7th level. When you use your multi-attack to make multiple attacks, you can replace one of those by casting a cantrip with a time of 1 action. This is in essence the same thing right here. War magic. You can use your action to cast a cantrip. You can make 1 weapon attack as a bonus action. It's the same thing more or less, but now it doesn't require the bonus action. So yeah, I like it. I like how it's set up. I think it's a pretty good Eldritch Knight for the most part. All right, so now we are on to the 2nd subclass, which is the Weapon Master, which is essentially the same thing as a Battle Master. So first, at 3rd level, you choose 3 weapons and you gain proficiency with those. And the other thing is that when you roll damage for an attack with that weapon, you get to re-roll one of those weapon dice, or those damage dice. So that I really like. There's not something like that with the fighter per se, but there is a similar ability on the monk with the Kensei monk, where a Kensei monk is able to choose different weapons and then gain abilities while using those. So while this isn't exactly the same thing, it is kind of similar in that you have a certain weapon that is like your favored ones. So I like that that's there. It does give the idea of being that weapons master, which I like the flavor of that. And then we get into the meat and potatoes of the fighter, or of the weapon master, which is the stunts, which are basically similar to the battle masters. Come on, let's I think that's as far out as I can zoom. Yeah. So the weapon master stunts are basically the same thing as the battle master maneuvers. They work very similarly, but they are different. So whereas before you would learn 3 maneuvers, you still only learn 3 stunts, but instead of having superiority dice that are a certain, you know, like they're a D8 and you get 4 of them, and when you reach level 7 they go up to they go to 5, and then you get another one at 15th, and I believe, I want to say that they improve as time goes by. Yes. So at 10th level, they become D10s, and at 18th level, they become D12s. That allows you to add more damage as you go along. So for example, sweeping attack, which is when you hit a creature with a melee weapon, you expend one of your superiority dice to attempt to damage another creature with the same attack. You have to target another creature within 5 feet. You roll your superiority dice, and you can deal that amount of damage to them. That actually is the equivalent of this arcing strike ability, where when you successfully deal damage with a weapon attack, you deal an additional half that damage to a different target within 5 feet of you. So whereas over here, you're having to use one of your dice, roll it, and that's the damage, over here it's a little bit more simple. You spend a single point and you use this ability, and you deal half the damage of what you already dealt. Now, you do actually get, in the beginning, a little bit less use of it, but as time goes on, you get more. So this is equal to your proficiency bonus +1, whereas over here, you start with 4. So Black Flag, you're getting 3 uses of your stunts. 5e, you're getting 4 uses of your maneuvers, but as time goes on, this will eventually max out to 7, whereas this only ever maxes out to 6. But it takes a while to get there, and honestly, it's about even. But other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. Your saves are 8 plus proficiency plus dex and strength, which is a classic save equation. But the abilities are pretty decent, in my opinion. So arcing strike, like we said, half damage to another creature within 5 feet. Cheap shot, when you hit a creature with a melee weapon, you get to make an extra attack that's unarmed. So again, kind of looking back to the monk, it's in a way kind of like their flurry of blows. Hobbling strike, being able to reduce a target's speed, make it count. You give yourself a +10, but you only get 1 attack. So if you have multi-attack, you are just saying, okay, I only get 1, and I'm gonna make it count. And I love the name for that. Parry works the same way as the parry that we had before. You can reduce some damage, whereas with this, it's 1d10 minus proficiency. Over here, it was your superiority die minus dexterity. So pretty similar as it is. Riposte allows you to use your reaction to immediately attack a creature that misses you. So again, pretty much the same thing. You can use reaction to make a creature, and if you hit, you add the extra dice. So with this one, you're not getting the extra damage, but it is what it is. Run through. So this is actually the same thing as Arcing Strike, but instead of it being a two-handed weapon that deals slashing, this is a weapon that deals piercing. So you're just kind of running through enemies. Shifting Strike, you can immediately move to a different unoccupied space within 5 feet of a creature that you hit, and it doesn't count against your normal movement. So this is, you attack, you shift, possibly, getting you into a more advantageous position if you've already used your movement as well. And lastly, sweep the leg. When you hit a creature no larger than one size above you, you can attempt to knock them prone. They must succeed a strength save or fall prone. So like it says, we intend to add more choices as playtesting continues, and I like this. I like where they're going with it. It's basically the same thing as the maneuvers, just a little bit more straightforward, and also not reliant on using those specific dice and having that go up. All right, so last thing for the Weapon Master, Deadly Flourish. This is literally the exact same thing as the Champion Fighter's ability of Improved Critical, where you get crits on 19s and 20s. So as simple and straightforward as you can get. But that pretty much wraps it up for the fighter. So in my opinion, I like where they're going with this. It's very similar to, like I said before, the fighter is more or less the exact same thing, but with these, instead of having your fighting style, you have these martial actions that you can pick up. I do like the fighting styles from 5e though. I think they give yourself an extra ability. They make it so that you are something different, and that they are more passive abilities, in my opinion. Whereas these are very cool, and I hope that they add more, because this to me just does not seem enough to really differentiate characters. But Spellblade, basically an Eldritch Knight. Weapon Master, basically Battle Master. So we've seen them very similarly, but this is kind of what we're working with. A lot of this stuff is going to look very similar to 5e. All right, up next we have our Wizard. Now again, much like the fighter, the Wizard is basically the same thing. The hit points are all the same, the proficiencies are all the same, but wait, they're not. You no longer get weapon proficiencies. I'm sorry, what? Why does a Wizard not have proficiency with a quarterstaff anymore, at least? This to me is the one oversight. I don't like the fact that they get no weapon they get no proficiencies in armor, weapons, or tools. I could understand if you took away their weapons and maybe gave them a tool proficiency, maybe an alchemy supply, or an herbalism kit, depending on their school of study. But to take that away, to take away some basic weapon proficiencies, that's kind of bunk, in my opinion. I mean, you're not even getting anything extra. You still only get 2 skill proficiencies from the same list. You're still only getting you're getting a dagger and a quarterstaff. So give me the proficiency to use this. Why would you give me weapons that I can't use? This is the one thing, or not technically you can't use. You can use them, you're just not going to get your bonuses to them. This is the one thing that kind of pissed me off, if I'm being honest with you. It's very simple. Just make this daggers and quarterstaffs. I don't care about darts and slings and light crossbows. That stuff is what it is. But give me the ability to actually wield my quarterstaff or dagger as a meaningful weapon, and not, flailing around with it. Need to be able to fight when you run out of well, not even when you run out of magic, but like if you're in an anti-magic field, you need to be able to whack something. You know, if magic runs out of you, then you need to whack some things with your quarterstaff. All right, so looking at this table is going to look very similar. 3 cantrips down to 4. It's the same layout of how many spell slots you have, but you should note there is a new column, rituals known. This is actually the one thing that has changed about this system when it comes to spell casting. So more or less, the spell casting for this is the same. Cantrips work the same way. There's 0 level spells. You have a spell book. You prepare your spells based on the spells that you know, and your spell casting ability is intelligence. Okay, so everything is more or less the same. What really changes is ritual casting. So, like it says here, as a wizard, you have access to a special type of long-form spell called Ritual. You do not need to prepare ritual spells to cast them, and they do not expend a spell slot when you cast. At first level, choose 1 ritual spell from the Arcane Circle ritual list. You learn additional rituals at higher levels as shown on the ritual column, which we already saw. Each ritual spell you learn must be of a ring of which you have spell slots. That's a big thing. They changed the name of spell levels to spell rings. I get the whole, like, they make this whole argument of like it's like rings in a tree trunk, and you know you have to start on the inside before you move out. I'm probably never going to get away from calling them spell levels. Like, it's a level 5 spell. I'm not going to say like a ring 5 spell or 5th ring spell. It's a 5th level spell. So if you hear me say spell levels and you see ring, just know it's the exact same thing and there's no difference. So each ritual spell you learn must be from a level of which you have spell slots, as shown on the table, and they do not count against the number of spells you know. This is very different from the ritual casting ability on the Wizard in 5e, where it says you can cast a wizard spell as a ritual if that spell has the ritual tag and you have it in your spell book. You do not need to have it prepared. So the spells in question, stuff like comprehend languages, detect magic, find familiar, these are spells that are able to be cast as is, but also cast as a ritual. Now, when you cast a ritual, the amount of time it takes to cast is increased. Okay, I think I actually already had this pulled up, or this is Ritual Caster. Sorry, this is Ritual Caster. No, we need the spell casting. Nope, not spell casting services. Nope, not Xanathar's Guide. Hold on. We're gonna bring up the PHB. We're gonna go to spell casting and rituals. Here we go. It is 10 minutes longer than normal. That's what that's what I was trying to remember. So that means that if you wanted to cast comprehend languages, you could burn a spell slot, cast it with 1 action, and you now for the 1 hour know those languages. You could also spend 1 hour casting it as a ritual, and it does not burn that spell slot. That is not the case in Black Flag. In Black Flag, those spells are now just ritual spells. I'm going to skip ahead a bit. We're going to look at that. Where'd it go? We need to go further. Here we are. Comprehend languages. Behind the curtain, note, this spell is no longer castable as a ritual. This is now just a full action. So you have to cast that as an action. You cannot spend that hour to cast it just as is. Same with Detect Magic. The spell, though, that did get this done to it is Create Familiar. Now, here's the thing. Find Familiar always had a casting time of 1 hour, but this meant that you could cast it without burning a spell slot. So, and it took, you know, it was 10 minutes, so it's not a huge deal, but now it's just a ritual. But it kind of bugs me that I can't cast Detect Magic as a ritual now to save that spell slot, or I can't cast Comprehend Languages now to save that spell slot. It's one of those things that it kind of feels like it's taken away from you in a sense. Like, the ability to cast stuff as a ritual is really powerful. For example, I don't know how this one will come up in the game. Wow. God, I couldn't spell alarm. Thought I was having a stroke. So something like alarm, for example, you can take 1 minute to cast and you create the alarm. What's up, Nacho Dad? Thanks for joining. So, you know, with alarm, you can cast it as a 1 minute normal cast, burn your spell slot, you create this. Or you can cast it as a ritual. There is this big difference between those because it saves you that spell slot. Maybe you ran out of spell slots throughout the day. It's the end of the night. Your party's about to rest. You want to create a warded area so that you guys can't be snuck up on. So you're going to cast Alarm as a ritual. Can't do that now if they make it, you know, not ritual castable. So I don't necessarily know how I feel about it yet. I have to kind of see it in play. But right now, I don't like the fact that they are just hard lining between these spells can be cast as ritual and these spells can't. I kind of like that you can have that ritual tag. And it's like, oh, you can cast this normally, or you can spend 10 extra minutes. But beyond that, things are more or less the same. Like I said, they call spell levels rings now, which is just weird. But it's all copy and pasted. Literally, like, like right here. On your adventures, you might find other spells you can add to your spell book. See your spell book. On your adventures, you might find other spells that you can add to your spell book. See the Your Spell Book sidebar. GM discretion, maybe house rule regarding ritual casting. I would probably lean more towards I would probably lean more towards allowing it, but I would I mean I would have to I would probably allow it just because I think it's I think it's a I don't like how it works, but because you get this new rituals known column where like it's its own thing, I don't know if you could just play that into the rest of it. I mean, there's still the ritualist, there's the ritualist feat, which does kind of give you some extra ritual casting stuff. But because this is its own column and they don't count as spells known, it kind of works against the system they've built. And if that's the case, you might as well just use the 5e system. So it's fine. I guess it is up to the DM. You know, it's so much like 5e that you could probably just remove that limitation and just use the 5e spellbook as is. So yeah, I mean, DM discretion is always going to be something. So, being that I have no intention of running a Kobold Press game or a Black Flag game, I'm not even going to worry about even questioning if I would homebrew it or not, or house rule it. But yeah. So moving on, again, copy and paste. Someone over at Kobold presses Control C, Control V on their keyboard is just worn out. These are literally the same words that have just been put in to either column. They, I mean, it's really funny. I think the only one that isn't is copying from a spell scroll. Yeah, I think that's the only part that's not on there. But other than that, it's all carbon copy. All right, so moving on from there, we are going to go down to the first ability that you get other than spell casting. So that is Arcane Recovery. It's literally the same thing. I think it's also verbatim. You have learned to regain some of your magical energy by studying your spell book. You have learned to regain some of your magical energy by studying your spell book. Yeah, and it's even like the same. For example, if you're a 4th level wizard, you can recover. Yeah, it's all the same. They just changed the name of spell level to ring. So it's not a 1st level spell slot. It's a 1st ring spell slot. So. All right, so on to the first thing that is actually different that I do like. So at 2nd level, you get this ability called Magic Sense. And I'm going to pull up Detect Magic here because it's very similar. So Magic Sense allows you to, as an action, for until the end of your next turn, so for 6 seconds, you know the location of creatures that can cast ability or that can cast spells, where ongoing spell effects are, and where magic items are within 30 feet, as long as they're not behind, like it says, copy and pasted, 1 foot of stone, 1 inch of common metal, a thin sheet of lead, or 3 feet of wood and dirt. And you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus plus 1, and you regain these on a long rest. I kind of love this. In my own opinion, I think this is a really cool ability because wizards almost always take Detect Magic because there's always a good time. There's never a bad time to use it. So I love the fact that, yeah, it's not 10 minutes and you don't just have an aura constantly pinging around you, but you can very quickly, instead of having to burn a spell slot or wait 10 minutes to cast a ritual for Detect Magic, which again, in this new system, you can't even ritual cast that spell, you can now just ping everything around you and get a sense of everything and where it is. So you can sense if somebody can cast a spell, you can sense magic items, you can sense an ongoing effect. So I think it's a really cool way to do it because they did take away that ritual casting of Detect Magic. They give you now an ability that kind of gives you the same effect. All right, so on the 3rd level, we have our Arcane Tradition. It's same thing, Arcane Tradition. That's still the name of the spell, the subclasses. Same thing as before with the Fighter, the improvement. Increase an ability score by 1 and choose a talent, so it's kind of the same thing. And then on to the first Arcane Tradition, the Battle Mage. So I actually don't have a direct comparison to make with the Battle Mage, because it's just kind of its own thing, honestly. When I was looking into this, I thought maybe it would be like a Warcaster, because it kind of is, but it's also not. So the way that Battle Mages works is when you take, whenever you gain a level that would give you an improvement, you now can take martial abilities as well as magic. This is the same thing the Fighter got as a spell blade, where they could take magic talents as well. So same thing for the wizard, you now get access to martial talents or the martial feats. Spell Ward is kind of different, and I love how it works. So with Spell Ward, when you cast a spell of 1st level or higher, you can simultaneously create a shield around yourself. While it's active, you get a bonus to your AC equal to your proficiency bonus. So at 3rd level, you're going to get a +2 to your AC, and you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, so mundane damage. And it lasts for a minute, or it ends if you're knocked unconscious, or if your turn ends and you haven't cast a spell of 1st level or higher. You can also choose to dismiss this, and you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Now, I want to make a comparison that's kind of hilarious. Let's look at the Fighter's Rage ability. When a the Barbarian. When the Barbarian rages, they gain resistance to bludgeoning and piercing, and it ends after 1 minute, or if you're knocked unconscious, or if you haven't attacked a hostile creature or taken damage. The Battle Mage spell ward ability is the Wizard's Rage. I want it to be called that so bad. I want this to be called the Wizard's Rage, because that's what it is. So often people talk about wizards being squishy and having low ACs because they don't have armor and because they have to burn a spell slot to cast mage armor. This just gives you a decent bonus to buff your AC and lets you reduce your mundane damage by half. It's the rage equivalent for a wizard, and I fucking love it. But there really isn't something to compare it to on the wizard list. The only thing that is slightly similar is Arcane Deflection, where when you're hit, you can use a reaction to give yourself a +2 to your AC, or a +4 to your saving throw. Now, it's kind of similar because it's, just a +2 bonus to your AC, but it is a reaction. And you also can't cast other spells other than cantrips. So it's kind of not the same as a war magic, but I just love how it's basically just Wizard's Rage. Moving on from there, Tactical Caster. When you cast a spell that deals damage, you can choose yourself and any number of creatures. Totem of the Bear Wizard, that's right. Whenever you cast a spell that deals damage, you can choose yourself and any number of allies you can see to be immune to the damage caused by the spell. This is, in essence, a more powerful version of the Evoker's Sculpt spells. So in 5e, Sculpt spells is that you get to choose a number of creatures equal to 1 plus the spell's level, and those creatures automatically succeed the save and take no damage if they would take half damage otherwise. So it's the same thing as Sculpt spells, it's just now Tactical Caster, and it's any number of allies. And I actually like that because it's less of like worried about the spell level, but I can also see that being abused of like, oh, well, who's an ally? Okay, is that little kid that is hiding in the corner of this tavern that you're about to set off a fireball, is he an ally, or is he just an unwitting participant to your carnage and mayhem? Because in my opinion, an ally would be a member of the party. So this is why I liked when it was like, you choose the creatures. And this kind of goes in line with something like Spirit Guardians, where you have to designate creatures that are not affected by that spell. So something like that is where minutia gets into play, and like how I mean, it is a lot of people that you could technically guard, but I don't know, I'd have to see it in play in order for me to truly judge it. And up next, the last one for the Battle Mage, Contingency Plan. When you fail to hit a creature with a spell attack, you can use a reaction to attempt to redirect the spell towards a different target within the spell's range, and you make a new spell attack for that target. This is kind of OP if that wizard has no better reactions. I'm sorry. It lets you redirect a spell that you missed against another creature. This reaction lets you make 2 attacks. Introduce yourself to NPCs before casting. Yeah, it's like, hi, I'm your friend. Boom. But yeah, contingency plan, in my opinion, is if that wizard has no other reactions, contingency plan is the only thing you should ever be using as a reaction. Like, oh, I cast Firebolt. I missed. Cool. Reaction. Contingency plan. I'm redirecting it to this guy. Oh, sweet. I get 2 attacks now. It's essentially multi-attack, but for a wizard. But it just requires you to miss on the first one and use a reaction, but you essentially get a second chance to hit somebody. And I do understand, you know, I have a lot of people in my games that play casters, and when you cast like a cantrip that's just, you know, like produce flame and it misses, it sucks. So it's cool to have this, but my God, is that powerful. And it's not even like a limited time thing. I could see if this was like, you know, you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, or, you know, a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier. Like, that would make sense. Just giving this out as a free reaction to get a second attack, or to get another chance if you miss, it's crazy. It's crazy. Now, the only thing that I can argue in favor of it is that it is specifically against a different target. So if you are only fighting one creature and you miss them, you can't redirect to anything else. But my God, is that powerful? Sounds like the wizards have been hitting the gym. That's about it. Yeah. All right, so on to the second and final wizard subclass, the cantrip adept. When I read that they had a cantrip based subclass, I lost my shit, because I love hedge wizards, I love minor casters, I love cantrip experts, where that's like your whole thing. In my opinion, I think cantrips are some of the best spells, or some of the best spells out there. I mean, like look at these beautiful spells. Let's take a look at some beautiful cantrips here. All right. Ooh, acid splash. Ooh, that's great. Booming blade. Oh shit, that's so good. Chill touch, some necromancy damage. Fuck yeah. Control flames, to be able to, you know, blow up fires and put them out. Create bonfire. Shit, yeah, I want to burn some stuff. Frostbite, green flame blade, gust light, mage hand, message, mending. Oh my God, cantrips are amazing. And the fact is, with this subclass, you get to learn 2 of them from any circle at 3rd level, and you can cast them as a bonus action if their casting time is 1 action. Now let's look at this. Look at all of these. You know what? We're gonna separate this. Let's look at just cantrips, okay? And then we're gonna look at just the ones that are actions. Oh yeah, that's literally 43 of them. 43 that you can now cast as a bonus action. I'm sorry, what? This is so good. I love it. I love it so much. The fact that you can cast Booming Blade as a bonus action and then do something else. Attack with a sword? Hello, Green Flame Blade calling. Yes, please. Yes, please. I mean, it also guidance. I'm sorry. This makes guidance uber powerful. Guidance has already been kind of like pseudo banned from a lot of tables because of the abuse that can be done out of it, because it's a one action +4 to an ability check of choice. You can just like, okay, I'm gonna cast guidance on myself. I need to get up this cliff. Cool. I'm gonna bonus action guidance myself, and then I'm gonna cast gust and like push myself up. Okay. I mean, or like whatever the case is, the fact that you can now bonus action cast. And here's the thing, this doesn't give you any limitation on what you can cast afterwards. It just says you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So you could cast Eldritch Blast. Let's say you multi-class Warlock and Wizard. You could cast this twice. Let's say that you multi-class Warlock, Wizard, Sorcerer. You could twin spell Eldritch Blast and cast it twice, and then bonus action cast it. And you can do that a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Oh boy, we are getting into some crazy shenanigans. Yeah, I mean, just hands down, this is an amazing ability. Arcane, I don't know how to pronounce this. We're gonna, you know what we're gonna do? How to pronounce?
Alacrity.
Alacrity. All right, well, there we go. Arcane Alacrity. Yeah, like I said, this is something that we haven't seen before in 5e. You know, there's been homebrew, you know, hedge wizard class or subclasses. This is so good. And again, cantrip polymath, the fact that you get to learn 2 cantrips from any circle spell list or any, you know, spell list, it's man, I love this. I've always wanted to play a cantrip based wizard. And moving on to the last ability, potent spell casting. This is kind of the same thing as empowered evocation from the School of Evocation, but with just the focus on cantrips. So at 10th level for empowered evocation, you could add your intelligence modifier to 1 damage roll of any evocation spell. This is that you add your proficiency bonus to 1 cantrip that you cast. So it's a little bit less, and it's also only on cantrips, but I mean, that's the whole design behind it. All right, so that was the wizard. Now we have the class, we have the battle mage, and we have the cantrip adept, and I think they're both okay. I mean, the wizard in itself is more or less the same as what we've been used to in 5e. That magic sensibility is pretty cool, but it only lasts for a round, but it doesn't burn a spell slot, so it balances out. Battle Mage is cool. It has its own abilities. It's something different, but it's kind of like Evocation, but also kind of like War Wizard, but it's its own thing. And Cantrip Adept is its own thing and kind of like Empowered Evocation later on. I personally like the Wizard a little bit more in this playtest because there is newer stuff. Whereas with the fighter, I felt like I was looking at just a rehash of Eldritch Knight and Battlemaster, and yeah, I had a lot more to compare it to. With the wizard subclasses between Spellblade and Cantrip Adept, I felt like it was just different, and I liked that. I liked that it was different. So, all right. So we are going to go on to the talents. Now, as mentioned before, Battle Mage just sounds metal. Battle Mage, yeah, is awesome. You can, you get a rage. I mean, it's so cool. I love it. I love it so much. All right. So yeah, focusing, getting back to talents. Okay. So, in the talents, when we first talked about this, when they put out the Black Flag Playtest 1, we went over all the talents in there and compared them to the ones that they were equivalent to. Now, there are some that were rehashed in this, and they give this behind the curtain of why. And there is some new stuff that is different, and I'm going to explain what the similarities between them are. So, Mental Fortitude is a rehash from the last time. So if we pull this up in here, you can see Mental Fortitude. Once per long rest, when you fail an Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma save, you can choose to re-roll the save and take the new result. You must declare your intention to re-roll before the results of the save are resolved. The second ability is not really the thing we need to worry about, but this basically just, if there's something that is affecting you that's ongoing that doesn't let you repeat the save, you can repeat the save. But we want to focus on this up here, this once per long rest. When you fail a mental save, you can re-roll it. They had to put in some new wording because of some confusion. So the new wording now is once per long rest, when you fail a mental save, you can choose to re-roll the save and take the new result. You must declare your intention to re-roll after you learned you failed, but before the GM has resolved the consequences of the roll. And I'm going to read this behind the curtain verbatim. A lot of you focused on the confusing language of the first bullet point of this talent in the playtest. So we wanted to re-include it in hopes of providing clarification. The intention of the sentence is to make it clear that a player must use this feature immediately after learning that they failed the roll, but before the GM does all the work of illustrating what a failed roll means in the game. It is our hope that this inclusion trains players to stay aware of their abilities, so the GM isn't put in the tough spot of calculating full damage, reading off a long description, walking through the full consequences of narrative failure, and etc., then just to have to take it back when a player suddenly remembers that they can use this feature after the fact. Thank you, Kobold Press. Thank you. As a forever DM, I constantly fear those moments of when somebody fails something and I start to narrate the consequences, and then 5 minutes later they go, oh wait, I had this ability, I would like to use it. It's like, you said that 5 minutes ago. You know, I just went through everything. We calculated health, monsters died, we moved on. When this was put in, I felt like a buff kobold, the Swobold, came down and lifted me in its arms and said, I have you. I understand your pain. And I said, thank you. I feel loved. Because this is exactly the verbiage we need. You must declare your intention to re-roll after you have learned you failed, but before the GM resolved the consequences of the roll. This should be included in everything that has a feature like this. Oh, you can re-roll something after you found out you failed, but before something, put this in. Please, for the love of God, players need to learn their skills, learn their abilities, and the DM can ramble on with their narration and then suddenly have to just take it all back. I love this. I love what they have done, and I am so happy that they put this in, because it shows that the people over at Kobold Press see that this is an issue. Yes, Nacho Dad, exactly that. This would make an excellent session 0 point. If you have an ability that claims that you can re-roll something or do something when you learn you failed, you must declare that you are doing that before I, as the DM, narratively resolve the consequences. Because once we get through and deal damage and we account for the shit that happens, you cannot use that ability, and we are not going back. Again, I have been running D&D for 10 years, and the amount of times that I have gone through some narration of effects and NPC deaths and players taking damage just for somebody to be like, I could have done this thing. It's like, well, you didn't. And I'm not always like that. I'm pretty understanding. You know, I'm a fairly easygoing guy. I don't take it personally, but there's times where I do. There's times where I do, and it gets so frustrating. The too bad, how sad roll. That's exactly it. Too late. All right, yeah, so get my blood boiling on that one. Yeah, I wanted to really touch on the mental fortitude, because I love the fact that they put that in there, because it is exactly what needed to be there. All right, so moving on from that, we got the new one, mental prowess. So mental prowess, this is basically the same thing as what we talked about before regarding how the classes were working. So right here for the wizard, when you reach 4th level, and again at 8th, you can increase one ability score by 1 and take a talent. In 5e, you have the ability to increase 1 score by 2, increase 2 scores by 1, or take a feat. Now, in the new UAs, a lot of the new feats give you bonuses to stuff. Give you bonuses to your ability scores. And they also include this one, which is the ability score improvement feat. Well, down here, this mental prowess is basically this, but just split up. Now, I don't necessarily think they need to have this in there as 2 separate ones, because if we just look a little bit further down the page, there's the other one, physical prowess. You can increase strength, dex, and con by 1. I don't know. Maybe just combine these. Name it something. I know that like naming it ability score improvement isn't like mental prowess and physical prowess, but like, I don't know. Sometimes a game needs to be a game and you just need to call something what it is. Like, ability score improvement is fine, and just let it be. You can increase any one of your ability scores by 1 to a maximum of 20. We don't need to have it split up like this, in my opinion. It's just like a waste of space on a page. All right, so moving on to Ritualist, and we do have something to slightly compare this to, and that would be Ritual Caster. So the way that the Ritualist feat works is very similar to Ritual Caster, but the difference is that when you take Ritual Caster in 5e, you pick a certain class, and then you must pick the spells from that class. This also determines what the casting ability is. So Charisma for Bard, Sorcerer, and Warlock, Wisdom for Cleric and Druid, and Intelligence for Wizard. Whereas with Ritualist, you are choosing one of the 4 circles: Arcane, Divine, Primordial, and Weird. Once you choose those, you get to add spells from that particular circle of magic, and you just get to use your normal ability save. So like it says, regardless of which circle you choose, you use your normal spellcasting abilities. But the cool thing about this is, unlike Ritual Caster, which is basically just when you get this, you have a book that has 2 first level spells, and you have to add all the spells from Spell Scrolls or a Wizard's spell book. With this one, each time you gain access to a new level of spell, you get to add a new ritual to your book. I think that's pretty cool. I think it's an incentive to actually take Ritualist. You know, you're spending this time, you're casting rituals more frequently, but you're just getting that, you know, those free spells as you go. Now, it is only 1 ritual spell of each spell ring that you've already unlocked, but if you're at level 4, that means that you're going to be casting at 2nd level already. If we go up here, so if you're at 4th level, you're already casting at 2nd level, so it is going to be 2 of them. It's just, you know, not 2 first levels. You actually get a first and a second. So I like how Ritualist is designed. It's pretty straightforward, but it's also a little bit more powerful than the old Ritual Caster. School specialization. I actually don't know why they re-added this. I looked at it. I think everything is basically the same thing. I want to pop this out for a second so that I can actually view these side by side on my side. All right, so you guys can see the new one. All right, so the old one lists everything the same. You get to add +1 to the attack roll when you cast a spell that target, save DC is increased by 1. If you use a spell book the gold. Oh, okay. So here's what they changed. I actually didn't know. And so originally you could select this talent multiple times. Now you can select it multiple times, but it has to be a different school of magic each time. I could see that being abused. I never even realized that. I didn't even have that in my notes from last time of school specialization being, being able to take it multiple times. Because, yeah, I could see a player, a savvy enough player, basically saying, okay, I'm going to be an evoker, and I'm going to take school specialization, evocation at 4th level. And then when whenever I make my character, because I think you can get that with, I think you get a feat or you get a talent when you make your character. I can't remember. But even if you didn't, like, okay, 4th level, I'm getting a +1 to all of my stuff. 8th level, I'm now getting a +2, and the amount of time is halved. So that would be quartered. So I could see a savvy enough player trying to argue that, but I mean, a good DM would have smacked that on the hand. But, gotta go by raw. Rules is written. Now it's written. All right. On to Artillerist. Artillerist is basically crossbow expert with a weird caveat. So, Artillerist says that you ignore the loading property of simple and martial weapons with which you are proficient. So that's good. That means you're crossbows and stuff. But that also means guns. And you also have advantage on attack rolls made with siege weapons, which isn't really a thing in 5e. Like, siege weapons are a thing, but they're very rarely used unless you have a very specific kind of adventure and campaign. But I find that this is very interesting because it's not tied to crossbows, which means if you have something like a rifle, which has the loading property, you can now ignore... Come on, there we go. Or no, that's right, that's reload. Oh, you know what, maybe. Hold on, is it blunderbuss then? Might be blunderbuss. No, it's reload. Okay, yeah, I might have just been wrong with that. So, I was under the impression that most guns had, I thought most guns... Oh, yeah, no, it is reload. Okay, so yeah, it's not that. But yeah, so it would still probably just align with crossbow then. Because that's, I think, the only thing that has the loading. Do I already have weapons open somewhere? Yes. We're going to look on here and find loading. So light crossbow, hand crossbow, and heavy crossbow. Oh, blowgun as well. That's dumb. That's so dumb. Oh, you know what? Actually, you know what I could do? I can do this, and I can go to items, and in here, we can filter this with the loading property. Now, keep in mind, I have a lot of homebrew content on 5e.tools. So as you can see over here, we're going to sort this by the source. These are the only 4 items in the player's handbook. Why do I have this? That's weird. These are the only 4 items in the player's handbook that actually have the loading property. The rest of this stuff is from Grim Hollow, so the repeater crossbow, flame bellows, all of this stuff. And then we got stuff from Amelwin's Guide to Monster Hunting. Yeah, the 2 blowguns, or bowguns. So, yeah, that's, obviously... You have different stuff in here that this would account towards, but if we are going by the books as standard, it's just those 4. So it's kind of the same thing as crossbow expert. Hand to hand, this was actually something that in the last playtest I was really interested in, mostly because it was kind of its own thing, but it was very similar to Grappler and Tavern Brawler. And the reason why they added this one back in is because they clarify that not all characters are automatically proficient with unarmed strikes, which is a deviation from the 5th edition rules. This change has a variety of mechanical implications, like giving greater value for selecting a talent like hand-to-hand, but ultimately the change was made for narrative reasons. After all, how many people do you know that can throw a great punch with 0 instruction or training? A character without proficiency in unarmed strikes no longer gets to add their proficiency bonus when they make a melee attack roll with an unarmed strike. If you are not proficient with unarmed strikes, a successful attack with an unarmed strike still deals bludgeoning damage equal to 1 plus your strength mod. So I'm going to pull up one of my players' characters here for a second. We're going to pull up Smith Thunderbeast, the Goliath Barbarian, and we're going to look at his unarmed strike. So with this, if his character was not proficient with unarmed strikes, that means that this would just be a +4. He's not going to get that proficiency bonus anymore. This would still deal 5 damage, so that's still a thing, but he is only going to get a +4 to hit. I like this for the narrative reasons like they say, but I can see a lot of players not liking this. But I get it. I get where Kobold Press is coming from with this. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but here, up here, we're gonna scroll a little bit further back up. We're gonna look at the fighter, because as you can see, the fighter does not have unarmed strike proficiency. How is a fighter not proficient with unarmed strikes? And I get that maybe they want this to be something that's like given to the monk, or maybe they're going to come out with a class or some kind of subclass for the fighter that gives them hand-to-hand, or that you're just supposed to take this talent. But I swear, if the monks do not have automatic proficiency with unarmed strikes, I am protesting, because they 100% should. But hand-to-hand from the last time that we did it still does the same thing. You're proficient with unarmed strikes, it's 1d6 plus strength, and you have advantage to initiate and escape grapples. It's the same thing. Actually, there is something that has changed. Before, if you were small, it was 1d4 plus strength. Now it's just 1d6 regardless. So I can actually erase that off of my at a glance. I agree there seems to be something missing as written. I agree fighters should have it and monks. Yeah, and I mean, obviously we don't know what monks are going to look like. We don't know, we don't even know if monks, if they're having monks. I imagine they will. I could guarantee it. But I'm still saying that fighters should have it, and if they don't have it as standard, there should be a subclass that gets it. Make it a grappler, make it some kind of like, brawler or something like that. I heard my dog. Hi, Bo. How you doing, Bug? Why is he wet? My dog is wet. I don't know why. Okay, it's not blood. That's all I care about. All right, so moving on. We have... Oh, wait, I edited the wrong page. Oops. Don't want to edit my old ones. All right, so we're moving on. So we have physical prowess. Like I said, we already talked about this. This, I think, should just be added to the mental prowess and should just be like, ability score increase or something like that. Something simple. Doesn't need to be fancy. And then we're going to look at Touch of Luck. Now, Touch of Luck is something that is obviously going to be very specific to this system because of the way that their new inspiration system works. So we have the Lucky Feat, which is still a thing in 5e. You get those, those 3 d20s that you can add. You can spend one to roll an additional d20 and take the one that you want. Touch of Luck does not really do that. But the way that this works is when you would gain a luck point as a result of failing an attack or save, you gain 2. And if you overflow your luck, you reset with 1d4 plus 1. So instead of it just being 1d4, it's 1d4 plus 1. And I think this is interesting, you know, with the introduction of the new luck system where you have 5 points and you can spend them, and you are getting them more often. You are getting, you are getting more opportunities for luck to happen. But you are also possibly recapping back up to 5. And like it says here behind the curtain, while we understand you won't be able to select the Touch of Luck talent if you are strictly using the content presented in this package, we still wanted to share it with you to preview how we're thinking about future options that could interact with the new luck mechanic. It could cause them to have to roll more often, though. Well, yeah, I mean, it causes you to see. It's not even so much that you have to roll more often. It means that you get to use your points more often, which you should be using. And granted, I mean, I can understand if you're saying you have to make more rolls throughout the day to use these, but the reality is like, you should be using these points more often if you have Touch of Luck. You could be adding 1 and 2 points here and there as you go along. So because again, the big thing to look at is that you gain luck points. You could gain luck points almost every turn, depending on how bad your saves are or your attack rolls are. This is not like a critical, okay? This is not like the systems that we use where it's on a critical. This is just once per turn. When you fail an attack or save, you gain a point. So you're gonna get these so often, and you should just be using them to bump your scores up by 1 and 2 where you can. So again, I like how Touch of Luck works because it's, it plays into that. It shows how they're trying to take talents and make them work towards other mechanics. And that, so that gets us through the talents. Now, I am not gonna sit here and go through all of the spell casting stuff, because there's like four or 5 pages on spell casting, and you make important point. Okay, yeah. So, and that's the thing, like, because of the way that we play, it's very possible, like, when I first read that, I was like, oh, you gain a point every time you roll a nat 1. That was what my mind first told me. When I reread this and like actually sat down with it, no, you could fail. If you miss your attacks every round, you are gaining luck every round. Like, it is insane how often you can gain luck points with that other system. But it's also that you only have 5 of them, and you should be using them the moment you, like, once you get them. Like, bump these things up, add these things in there. So like I said, I'm not going to go too crazy into the spells and like the spell casting stuff. This is all very similar to 5e. It's almost exactly the same. This is the image that they use to demonstrate the spell rings. Like the first level spells are a little bit weaker. I thought it was 5 luck points to reroll. It's only 3. Yeah. Yep. So, the first one is really small. It uses the least amount of energy other than cantrips, which are 0. Second uses more energy. Third uses more, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like a tree. I don't care how they do this. It's what it is. If they're trying to justify it narratively about, like, why is it not levels? Because I actually just had this conversation with some folks the other day of like, why are they called levels? What does that mean? Like, how is that justified in game? And arguably with this, I could see an argument trying to be made for an in-game narrative of how like spell levels work, but I don't know. I think, again, like I said before, sometimes you just have to recognize that you're playing a game and just roll with it. So yeah. Now here's the thing. There is something in here about conversion. So because spells in 5th edition fall under different different schools of magic, that's something that we're very used to. It's the basic core schools. But with this, the way that circles of magic work is based on whether they're arcane, divine, primordial, or weird. Now, arcane spells are spells that detect, suppress, and or otherwise interact with mechanical aspects of spellcasting, spells that harness elemental energy such as acid, cold, fire, lightning, and thunder, and spells that interact with the 5 senses, whether to fool them or to extend their capabilities. So if we look over here, something like Acid Splash, which harnesses elemental energy, would fall under arcane. Moving on to divine, these are going to be spells that specifically interact with another creature's life force to heal or hurt them. So something, let's get rid of the cantrip designation there. So something like Cure Wounds, for example, would be a divine circle. Spells that harness necrotic or radiant energy, so something like Chilled Touch, which is necrotic, that's going to be divine. And spells that specifically interact with a deity or include the words faith, so stuff like that would probably be guidance, because that is, in my opinion, that is kind of in sense with that. But this could also be something like bless, or I guess maybe ceremony, or here it is, divine favor. This is what I was thinking of. Yeah, so something like this would obviously be divine. Primordial spells are spells that alter or enhance a creature's biological characteristics. So this would be something like Bark Skin. Jesus Christ, I think there was a bug on my leg. So this is going to be something like Bark Skin. This is also spells that specifically interact with plants or beasts. So this is going to be speak with animals, speak with plants, locate plants or animals, or the spell replicates an effect that could theoretically occur as a natural phenomenon. So arguably this one, when I first read this, I was like, well, that's kind of weird, because arguably fireballs can happen in real life, but I would say a fireball would obviously be arcane, because that's harnessing elemental energy. So I don't necessarily know how this argument is being made, because like levitate can't happen. I mean, heat metal, I guess, could be primordial, but I would argue that's also arcane, because you're harnessing fire, you're harnessing energy to heat it. But could that be a natural phenomenon? I don't know. I was trying to look at some of this as I was reading these, and like what would be primordial and stuff like that, and I don't know exactly what this is, other than stuff where it's like weather stuff that like control weather, for example. This would 100% be primordial. Okay, this is going to be a spell that is obviously natural phenomenons, but it's also just so high up there. But reverse gravity, I don't necessarily know if that's a natural phenomenon. Firestorm, is that a natural phenomenon, or is that harnessing elemental energy? I don't know. And then the last one is weird. So it summons a creature from a different plane or realm of existence. So this is going to be this is pretty much going to be all of our summon fae, lesser demons, shadow spawn, undead. Where's all the others? There's so many. Summon beast. There's so many different summoning spells out there, and just as you go higher, summon abjuration, construct, elemental, greater demon, celestial, draconic spirit, I mean, the list just goes on. But it's, you know, that's obviously going to be weird. Spells that harness energy that is not elemental in nature. So that to me is going to be stuff like Eldritch Blast, which is force damage, stuff that is psychic damage. So that I think is understandable. And then spells that allow travel between the different planes of existence. That's, you know, that's a lot of those conjuration spells. Gate. Let me pull that up here. Yeah, there we go. So Dimension Door, Gate, what's the big one? Yeah, Misty Step. So a lot of that stuff. Hunger of Hadar and Arms of Hadar are 100% gonna be in weird, because you're literally like bringing forth tentacles from the other planes. So again, it's nothing too crazy. It's kind of what we're already seeing with the new UA for OpenD&D, where they have the 3 different spell lists, where you have Divine and Primal and Arcane. So I get it. Like, you know, it's going to be very similar. It's just you don't have that weird one, which I actually kind of like that that's its own thing, but I think it also just adds in more stuff that you have to, you know, look into. All right, so we're gonna skip the rest. Honestly, again, the rest of this is more or less just carbon copy from 5e. You know, all the schools of magic are the same. How prepared spells works, how cantrips work, rituals. Again, that changed, but again, we already talked about this. So yeah, like it says here, ritual spells have been altered in the way they appeared in 5th edition to clarify how and when they should be used. By placing spells with longer casting times into a separate category, we're emphasizing that ritual spells are not meant to be used in combat and encouraging players to think of them as tools to aid with exploration and social encounters. So that's their reasoning, that's their argument. You know, I'm fine with it. I think some of them are, you know, better than others, but it is what it is. And then we're going to go down here to our arcane spell list. Now, obviously, we only have the arcane spell list because we only have the wizard, and they are arcane. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are basically just the same spells that we have from 5e that would go towards this. But some of the things that have changed. So, we are going to be looking at the ones here that have changed in this playtest. So, comprehend languages. Note, this spell is no longer castable as a ritual. So, whereas before you have that ritual tag, now you don't. So, you can only cast comprehend language as an action to use for that hour, and that's it. I think that's a missed opportunity. I don't like that. Detect magic, again, they took away your ability to cast it as a ritual. I don't like that. I think it should be able to be cast as a ritual, but it is what it is. It's fine. Then moving on to mage armor. Now, mage armor has actually changed in a different way, but it kind of achieves the same effect. So, the original mage armor is when you cast this for 8 hours, your armor class becomes 13 plus your dexterity modifier. Let's say you are a wizard. Let's say you have a +3 to you have a +3 dexterity. This means your AC is equal to 16. With the new mage armor, you gain a bonus to your AC of +3. Now, the armor class calculation is 10 plus your dexterity if you're not wearing armor. So, what is going on with my stream? Man, things have just slowed up. Oh my god, what is going on with my connection? Whoa. Sorry folks, my connection is dropping like a mofo. Whew. Hold on. Okay, we're starting to recover now. There we go. We're getting our speeds back up and running. Okay. Sorry about that. Wow. I don't know if you guys saw any difference. All of a sudden, I saw my bit rate entirely drop off. But we are back to normal now. All right. Sorry about that. So what I was saying is, the original mage armor. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was on my end. No, it was my bit rate. My bit rate just completely crashed. But we were back up and running. So the original mage armor is 13 plus dex. If you are a wizard with a +3 dexterity, that means you have a 16. The new one is a +3 to AC, and the armor class calculation is 10 plus dexterity. So if you have a +3 to dexterity and you get a +3 to your AC, that puts you up to 16. It's literally the same thing. A +3 bonus to your AC is the same thing as saying 13 plus dexterity. The difference is that the way that this changes is when you so the old way was that the base AC becomes 13 plus dexterity. The new one is that they gain a bonus. So this means that if you have other abilities that would stack that stuff actually does not take effect. I'm going to try and find where it was. Because that is actually something that changed. Where was it? Maybe I should just look up stack. Okay, it's not stack. There was something, I know I read it somewhere, that basically said that if you have two abilities that would give you the same thing, you take whatever is the highest. Here it is, combining magical effects. The effects of different spells add together while the durations of those spells overlaps. The effects of the same spell cast multiple times do not combine, however. Instead, the most potent effect, such as the highest bonus, from those casting applies while they overlap. For example, if two wizards cast mage armor on the same target, they gain the effects of one, which is more or less how it has worked in the past. Like I said, I just wanted to kind of point this one out because of how they changed mage armor from being a base AC to being a bonus to AC. Again, it's kind of worded this differently, but it does kind of come out the same way in the end. And second to last, we have Magic Missile. I don't know why they actually included it in here other than just having it on there, but there's nothing different. It's still one action, still 120 feet, doesn't require material, instantaneous. It creates 3 darts. They just hit creatures. So, Magic Missile does not miss. You don't roll to hit. You just deal damage. And it's still 1d4 plus 1 for each target. And when you cast higher, you gain an additional dart. The only reason I think they changed it is because now it's like each ring slot, but they wouldn't have to add that because they'd have to just add that for all of these other ones that they didn't list. So why not just, why not leave this one out? I don't know. I don't know why they chose to put this in. I mean, the wording is slightly different, but, it is what it is. Now we are on to the final part of this playtest, and that is the Create Familiar spell. Now, if you're familiar with 5e, you probably know the Find Familiar spell. It's a ritual, or it can be cast as a ritual, but it takes an hour to cast. And it costs 10 gold worth of charcoal, incense, and herbs, which is consumed by fire in a brass brazier. And when you cast this, you get to choose one of these particular, creatures and create a familiar, or you can use other beast forms. There's a lot, but you can just kind of work with your DM. And this has been there since the beginning. It's been, this was back in the very beginning, the player's handbook, and it's just kind of as it is. You create this thing, it it cannot attack, but you can give it other actions. If it drops to 0 hit points, it disappears. You can dismiss it into a pocket dimension. You can then resummon it from the pocket dimension. And while it's within 100 feet, you can communicate with it telepathically. Additionally, you can see through its eyes and hear what it hears until the start of your next turn. And you gain the benefits of any of its special senses. During this time, you are deaf and blind. You can't have more than one familiar. And finally, when you cast a spell with a range of touch, you can have your familiar deal it as long as they are within 100 feet. Create Familiar from Kobold Press's Black Flag changes this slightly, but to something I love. So, the first thing you'll notice, the range has changed, which is not a big deal, but the components have changed. No longer is it 10 gold worth of materials consumed by fire in a brass brazier. It is now simply a life-size statue, puppet, stuffed animal, or otherwise suitable vessel worth at least 10 gold. When you cast a spell that has a material component, if it has a cost, you actually have to have that item. If it is consumed, it is destroyed in the casting. Because the old one was 10 gold that was consumed, you had to constantly have that 10 gold. You had to have those materials. Now, you could have a stuffed animal of your familiar and that's worth 10 gold and just summon it. And here's a trick. This is something that I did back in the day, and my DM said I was a shit for it, but I stood by it to this day. If in this case you took a stuffed animal and then took, 2 pieces of platinum and put them inside of there, you now have a stuffed animal worth 10 gold, in my opinion. Okay? If you sew those pieces of platinum, those 2 pieces of platinum, which are worth 5 gold a piece, into this thing's chest, you now have a stuffed animal worth 10 gold, my friend. That's good, okay? That's all you need. Have a life-size statue. You have a little owl statue, and, you can slide. It's a piggy bank, and you can put 10 gold into it. That's great. It works. So, what makes this different, though? Well, for the most part, the very beginning is pretty much the same. You perform this ritual, you summon into existence this creature, you use your own life force to create them now. You get the same set of stat blocks, but now instead of it being a Fey, Fiend, Celestial, Fey, or Fiend, it is now a construct instead of a beast. So, it is no longer a spirit that takes the form of an animal. This is now more of a construct. So this is not conjuration now, this is transmutation. What really seals this is the Bound in Blood ability. When your familiar first appears, your hit point maximum decreases by 1. If you permanently dismiss your familiar or it is otherwise permanently destroyed, you get that hit point back. This cannot be offset by any means as long as the familiar lives. So you cannot get that maximum hit point back until your familiar dies. While you are on the same plane with your familiar, you can magically communicate with it telepathically, and it can convey to you what it sees or senses. Now, this is different. Before it was 100 feet, you could communicate with it, and then you could view through its eyes and hear what it hears, during which you are blind and deaf. This is now changed where instead of you seeing through its eyes and hearing through its ears, you are now just being told, I'm seeing this, I'm smelling this, I'm hearing this, I feel this. You are just getting information. You are now just getting information from them. You're not seeing through their senses, going blind and deaf on your own side. So you don't need a fancy statuette like Dritz. That is kind of the thing, a life-size statue. But technically, Dritz's statue was not because it was a familiar. That was because that was an old version of the fighter ranger ability for an animal companion. So, but yes, the statue still letting him summon Guinevere. So controlling your familiar still works basically the same way. They act independently, but it obeys your commands. It can't attack, but you can have it do anything else. You can have it cast a touch spell through it, so that's still the same. And if it drops, oh yeah, no, sorry, we skipped this. My favorite part, in fact. So before, you could dismiss this into a pocket dimension. Like it says, you can temporarily dismiss it into a pocket dimension. That is not a thing anymore. The way that this used to work was that you would dismiss it to the pocket dimension and you could cause it to appear within 30 feet of you. Now, I personally use this in an old campaign to help get to help us get onto the other side of a locked gate that nobody could squeeze through. I had my familiar go into his pocket dimension and I just resummoned him on the other side. With the new create familiar, you can't just have them poof into nothingness. You can now reincorporate themselves into your body, where your familiar melds into your skin, and then you can then later use an action to expel it from your body. I love the flavor of this. I love the narrative implications of this, of watching a wizard dismiss his familiar of an owl, you know, just like calling forth his owl and like having the owl's wings press against him and all of a sudden it just melts into his body. I love that. I love that narrative discussion. Or that, sorry, not narrative discussion. The discussion that would happen in game with the party of like, it's like, did the wizard just absorb his pet owl? It's like, yeah, it did. I love it. I love it so much. And finally, if a familiar drops to 0 hit points, it's instantly destroyed. But if you still live, your familiar regrows a new body in 1 hour, regaining all of its hit points and becoming active again. And it appears within 5 feet of you. If you die, it is permanently destroyed and the ritual must be performed again. So here's the main thing. It's the same, but it's kind of not. It's a little bit better when it comes to the communication because you don't have to be within 100 feet, but it's also a little different because it's no longer a spirit that looks like something. It's an actual like homunculus that you have created from yourself. But if it is destroyed, you don't have to recast Find Familiar anymore. It's gonna come back in an hour. So yeah, it's kind of the same amount of casting time. You just have to give it that time. You're just not burning through your ritual again. So like you still have to have the ritual to get it in the first place, but you know, it's fine. But that is gonna bring us to the end of playtest number 2. Now, overall, I so far am fairly satisfied with the stuff that we're seeing. In general, I don't think we're seeing anything super groundbreaking. I don't think there's anything that is like really blowing me out of the water. I like some of the changes they've done. I really like the luck system they're employing. I might put this into one of my games, you know, in time. But overall, the fighter class looked pretty decent. It is what it is. The spell blade is kind of cool. It's a just variant on Eldritch Knight. The weapon master is a variant on Battle Master. The wizard is pretty okay. You know, I don't like how ritual spells are working right now, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm willing to give it some, you know, some time to, you know, sit there. But Battle Mage is really cool. I love the tactical caster ability that's more powerful than Sculpt Spells. The contingency plan is pretty OP. And then also the fact that you get a You get that Wizard Rage, so Battle Mage is pretty sick. The Cantrip Adept, again, that has a special place in my heart. I always love Hedge Wizards and Cantrip Experts, so getting to cast one action cantrips as a bonus action is cool. Learning extra cantrips, also getting the empowered evocation for cantrips is good. And then also those talents, and the only one that I really have any issues with is those mental prowess and physical prowess. They just need to be tied hand in hand. They just need to be one thing so that it's not, you know, like, because you could really, like, you could break those up just to be a shit. Like, oh, you know, you could put, like, you know, strength prowess and dexterous and, or, you know, like strong and dexterous and constituted, intelligent, wise, and charismatic. And, like, it's like this one increases your charisma by 1 to a maximum of 20. It's like, you could break it up however you want, but just put, you know, just put ability score increase. Give us the basic, like the UA did here. You know, increase 1 score, and you don't even have to have this. It's just you increase 1 ability score of your choice by 1. You can't increase it above 20. It's simple. And yeah, you know, obviously with the spells, you can't cast comprehend languages and detect magic as rituals anymore. So you are casting them with full slots, but create familiar is a little bit more powerful, you know, in its design, and also it doesn't consume materials anymore. So that's pretty much the overview of the Project Black Flag playtest packet number 2. This was put up on Friday the 17th. So, is there any particular part you'd give more detailed feedback on, or have given? I know that I did submit my stuff for the playtest, for the first playtest. I honestly can't remember. I can't remember what I don't know if it would let me go back in. I doubt it would let me go back in and see that. But, I mean, is there something that I would give more detailed feedback with? The mental prowess and physical prowess, I think that just needs to be, you know, that just needs to be one thing. Beyond that, I don't know. I think what they have here is pretty good. I will say this, it's kind of hard to give detailed feedback when most of this is just copy and pasted from 5e. There's a lot of cool things, and some of it's just reworded. Deadly Flourish is the same thing as improved critical. Buff Wizards is cool, that's right. So, you know, the ritual casting is one of those things that I might provide, you know, my opinion on. But the problem is that I can only provide my feedback based on what I read and what I discern from this. I'm probably not going to get a chance to playtest this to really give them like reasonable feedback, you know, regarding this stuff. So I need to just close out all these windows, sorry. But I'm not really going to be able to give them like playtest feedback. But the one thing that still just doesn't sit with me too well is the ritual casting stuff. You know, I don't know how I feel. I don't necessarily know how I feel yet about you having specific rituals. I don't know how, though, they plan on that being implemented later on. Seems like smart players could OP some of these builds. Yeah. I mean, and I will say this, Black Flag abilities are generally more powerful than 5e, but that's also because they are more or less being compared to the original player handbook subclasses and abilities. So those old subclasses and abilities were fairly weak because things just get stronger every time they release something. So this is going to be more in line with how it could be more powerful now. But yeah, I mean, if I had to really like pick 3 things that I would give them feedback on, I would say first thing is, change how mental prowess and physical prowess is worded. Just give us one talent. Don't do rituals as what you're doing. From what I can see, it just makes things weird. Do we really need to have spells that are specifically rituals that can't just be, burned with a spell slot? And I get it. Maybe it's only going to be the long ones, but let me cast Comprehend Languages as a ritual. Give me that option. And maybe they could change Ritualist, the Ritualist talent, which gives you books. Maybe they could add a talent that lets you cast spells as a ritual, but I doubt that they would do that. The other thing that I would give them feedback on is more of a picky thing. Don't call them rings. But don't call them rings. Just call them levels, please. And I've heard the arguments of like, well, they wanted to differentiate between player level and, character level and, class level and your spell level. That's fine. But at the same time, it's not a big deal. Like, it's still the same system. You want to cast a 17th level spell, you got to be level 13, or 7th ring spell, you got to be level 13. What does that change? How does that differentiate it? I want to cast a 7th level spell. I need to be level 13. Okay, cool. That makes sense. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it's understandable. But those would be my 3 things. Change mental prowess and physical prowess to 1 ability. Explain to me what the good reasoning behind ritual casting is, and just name them levels. You don't need to have this tree trunk, metaphor. But that's my opinions. So, if anybody who's watching this, now or after the fact, is interested in offering up your opinions based on all of this information, feel free to join me over at the Discord with everyone else, right above me, the link there. Or if you click the About button below my stream, and there's a big old Discord button that you can click to join us over at Kelf's Corner, where I will be posting my at a glance, which is all of the notes that I make on all of this stuff, so that we can have a clean collective of what is in there for future reference. So if you have your opinions about this, you want to talk more about it, feel free to join us over in the Discord. But beyond that, I am gonna head off. I gotta get some sleep. I'm exhausted from a long day, and I'm going to see the Dungeons and Dragons movie tomorrow. So I'm gonna get some sleep. So you folks have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, I love doing this kind of content. If you love hanging out with me and listening to some chill tavern music and talking about some D&D and tabletop RPG, feel free to hop back in here whenever I go live again. Give me a follow here on Twitch if you want to get notified when I go live, or just join the Discord because it notifies you when I go live. It also notifies you when anyone else in there goes live, because there's a lot of streamers in there, and there's people streaming really cool stuff like video games, or my friend Aaron, who I think is still currently streaming for his Armored Combat League, or that might be over. Let's see if that's still going. Hey, look at that. My friend Aaron is currently live. So what we might do is I might just pop you guys on over to there, and if you want to hang out there, that's what we'll do. So if you want to head over and support my friend Aaron, who's going to be talking about his Armored Combat League, join the raid. We're going to head over there, and then I am going to head out for the night. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace out.